How did medieval warriors really use shield walls? And why would their tactics have flopped in your favorite movie scenes? Hollywood loves to show shield walls as wild, messy brawls, but real infantry packed in so tight that an apple thrown at the formation wouldn't even hit the ground. Most soldiers stood just 2 or 3 feet apart, not scattered like extras in a movie battle. In this video, you'll see how movies get it wrong, from the Bayeux tapestries, flying axes, to why that dramatic full-tilt cavalry charge would have ended badly in real life. We'll freeze-frame movie mistakes, break down real formations, and give you a chance to spot the errors yourself. So, if you think shield walls were just chaos and clashing swords, you might want to take a closer look. When you watch a medieval battle scene in a movie, it almost always turns into a wild mess. Shields are flying, swords are swinging in every direction, and half the soldiers look like they're auditioning for a dance competition instead of fighting for their lives. But this isn't how it worked. If you put a real medieval infantryman on a Hollywood set, he'd probably have a meltdown at the lack of discipline. A true shield wall was more like standing jammed in a subway car during rush hour, except your survival depended on the person next to you not messing up. There's a reason medieval commanders obsessed over order, and it wasn't because they wanted to kill the mood. Let's compare what you see on screen to what actually happened. In shows like The Last Kingdom, you'll see Vikings forming a tight wall, but then the Anglo-Saxons charge in all over the place, like they forgot the point of the shield wall entirely. It makes for a dramatic scene, but it's not how either side would have fought. Both armies would have used the same disciplined tactics, locking shields shoulder to form a barrier. The edge of one shield tucked behind the curve of the next, with no flashy spins or wild swings. Just a solid human wall. Historian Clifford Rogers describes it as a formation so packed that an apple thrown at the formation could not pass between their bodies. That's the level of discipline we're talking about. Movies love to toss in the testudo formation for extra flair, but that's another Hollywood invention. The testudo was a Roman siege tactic, not a battlefield move for Vikings or Anglo-Saxons. It needed serious training, and there's no evidence these groups ever used it. The closest real-life equivalent was simply standing close enough that your shield protected both you and your neighbor. In a real reenactment, you'd see shields locked so tightly that there's barely room to breathe, much less swing a sword over your head. I once tried holding a shield wall at a medieval fair, thinking I just had to push forward. Instead, I learned the hard way that you can't jam 2 shields together without nearly gouging your neighbor's hand. The instructor grinned and said, "Spacing isn't about comfort. It's about keeping the guy next to you alive." That was the lesson. The tiniest gap could break the wall, and breaking the wall was a quick way to get everyone hurt. You might wonder why movies keep showing one hero breaking out for a solo duel in the middle of the fight. In reality, that was a disaster waiting to happen. The whole purpose of the shield wall was to make sure nobody became a target. If you left your spot, you exposed yourself and the people beside you. No one was cheering for the guy who left the line. He was the one everyone blamed if things went south. Spartan public figures like Demaratus and poets like Tertius praised absolute formation discipline, showing that sticking together wasn't just a rule, it was the difference between life and death. Movies ignore this because chaos looks more exciting, but real soldiers valued the wall above all. Let's talk about how the shield wall actually worked. Imagine an animation, arrows flying toward the formation, but instead of panic, the soldiers hold steady. Each shield's curve covers the man on the left and right, overlapping just enough to form a solid barrier. There's no spinning, no dramatic sword tosses, just patience, grit, and a lot of aching arms. The strongest guy wasn't the one swinging the hardest. The real winner was the one who could stand still and not flinch, even when the pressure built up. The magic of the shield wall wasn't in heroics, but in trust. If you moved out of place, even for a second, you risked the entire formation collapsing. Movies also love to throw in fire arrows for dramatic effect, but that's another myth. Fire arrows were siege weapons, mostly used to set buildings or siege engines on fire, not to scatter shield walls of infantry. In a field battle, a flaming arrow would do little more than bounce off a shield or fizzle out in the dirt. It looks cool on screen, but it's not what happened in real life. Now, imagine yourself in that wall. You're pressed so close to the next person that your shield digs into your forearm, and you're trying not to flinch as arrows thud into the barrier. Someone behind you is shouting orders, and the guy next to you is gripping his shield so hard his knuckles are white. Could you keep your cool, Or would you be the one who slipped out of position and opened a gap? That gap could get you and everyone around you flattened in seconds. The real glory of the shield wall wasn't about looking good or pulling off a flashy move. It was about holding your spot, following orders, and trusting the people beside you. Medieval commanders didn't care about dramatic shots or slow-motion heroics. They cared about survival, and survival meant moving as a single, unbreakable line. So next time you watch a movie where the shield wall falls apart into a free-for-all, remember, in reality, discipline and patience were everything. And when it came time to move, the real challenge was just beginning. Let's get to the scene every blockbuster seems to love. Two armies facing off, then, bam. Everyone sprints forward, shields bouncing and swords waving, as if a quick dash is all it takes to win a medieval battle. The ground shakes, extras flail, and right when it's about to turn into a giant pileup, the movie cuts to slow motion for dramatic effect. But here's the reality check. No real medieval commander worth his salt would ever tell his men to run straight into a wall of armed opponents. Charging like a maniac wasn't just reckless, it was a great way to get your own side cut down before you even got close. So, does a wild, full-speed charge actually work? Or is this just another bit of movie magic that makes battles look more exciting than they were? The answer is simple. If your army broke into a sprint toward a waiting shield wall, you were basically asking for disaster. It's like sprinting to punch a hole in a brick wall for no good tactical reason. The whole point of a shield wall was to keep the line together, shields locked tight. As soon as some people moved a little faster, or someone in the back tripped, the entire formation started to come apart. Try moving in step with a dozen people. If anyone speeds up, slows down, or stumbles, the line wobbles and gaps open. At anything faster than a careful shuffle, keeping that wall solid becomes impossible. Gaps mean openings, and openings mean the enemy gets a free shot. If you could watch a real medieval approach, you'd be bored out of your mind waiting for the action. Shield walls advanced at a crawl. No mad dash, no dramatic music, just a slow, tense push forward, every step measured. The defender's job was to stand their ground, shields overlapping, not to break formation and chase glory. Because the second someone left their spot, the whole defense could unravel. The shield wall was built on patience and teamwork, not speed. Medieval military theorists saw right through the Hollywood sprint. Take Jean de Biel, a 15th century French marshal who wrote actual advice for cavalrymen and infantry. He put it bluntly, a formation on foot should never march forward, but should always hold steady and await its enemies on foot. That wasn't about being timid. It was about survival. Holding your ground meant your line stayed strong, your shield stayed locked, and anyone foolish enough to charge at you would regret it in seconds. The only time you'd move forward at all was if you saw a clear weakness in the enemy's ranks. Otherwise, you waited and let the other side make the first mistake. Let's look at a real example. The Battle of Hastings in 1066. The Normans, led by William the Conqueror, had to attack an Anglo-Saxon shield wall that was parked on top of a hill. Instead of a heroic sprint, the Normans trudged uphill, step by painful step, while the Saxons hurled everything they had from above. If the Normans had tried a full-on charge, their formation would have fallen apart on the slope, leaving gaps for the Saxons to exploit. Even a single stumble could send men tumbling and open a hole in the line. The uphill run left the Normans exposed, and a lot of them paid for it. That's what happens when you ignore the basics: cohesion and discipline. Imagine a football team forced to hold hands while running a play. Except now there are arrows flying, the ground is slippery, and the other team is hoping you trip first. Not exactly the stuff of movie montages. On a real medieval field, there was no stirring soundtrack. Just the thud of boots, the clatter of shields, and a lot of nervous breathing. The real winner wasn't the fastest or the loudest. It was the person who could hold their spot and keep the wall together, even when chaos threatened to break it apart. If you want to know what a real advance looked like, picture a group of people trying to push a heavy sofa across a room. Awkward, slow, and definitely not glamorous. The slow, measured advance was a survival tactic, not a cinematic choice. Rushing ahead only landed you in trouble, usually flat on your back, before you even got close to the enemy. So next time you see a movie army charging headlong, try to spot the exact moment where the line would actually start to fall apart. If you find a scene where the formation stays together, you've probably stumbled onto a rare bit of historical accuracy. The real weapon of the shield wall wasn't speed or brute force. It was stubborn, patient teamwork. That's what kept people alive, even when things got ugly. Of course, there was more to surviving a battle than just holding your ground. Before the shield walls even clashed, there was another threat that movies almost always ignore. Let's talk about the one thing movies always seem to miss: the chaos from above. Where are the flying axes? The forgotten role of projectiles. If you've ever watched a medieval battle scene and wondered why nobody is ducking, you're not alone. In real shield wall combat, the air was thick with things you definitely did not want to catch. Movies might have you believe everyone just stands around waiting to clash swords, but the real opening act was a storm of spears, axes, and whatever else someone could hurl. The Bayeux Tapestry isn't just a pretty piece of embroidery. It's basically a stitched play-by-play of how medieval warfare really looked. And if you pay attention, you'll see more than just swords and shields. There are javelins flying, axes spinning through the air, and even rocks being hurled downhill. The missile fire wasn't just a few token shots. It was relentless. The tapestry shows lines of attackers climbing over soil ramps, all while a constant barrage rains down. Arrows, especially, targeted the faces of unarmored soldiers, a brutal detail that you'll never see in a PG-13 blockbuster. The point is clear. Nobody in that front line had time to look heroic. They were too busy trying not to get hit by something flying out of the sky. Take the Battle of Hastings as a case study. Everyone remembers the shield wall on the hill, but what most movies skip is the gauntlet the Normans had to run just to get there. The Anglo-Saxons didn't just wait politely for the Normans to arrive. They let loose with javelins, spears, axes, and rocks, making every step up the slope a gamble. The historical accounts and the tapestry both agree. At the Battle of Hastings, the Anglo-Saxons strategically employed projectiles, including javelins, spears, and stones, to impede the Norman advance. Some sources describe this as a deadly hail that could break up formations before swords were even drawn. The real damage often started before the shield walls even touched. You might think of the back rows of a shield wall as just bystanders, but in reality, they were the ones making life miserable for the enemy. They hurled anything they could get their hands on, not just for show, but to weaken the line and create openings. Axes, for example, weren't just for close combat. They were early medieval missiles, thrown in hopes of knocking out a shield or a head. Spears were even more common. If you had a few dozen guys in the back, each could throw 20 to 30 spears per minute. That's hundreds of projectiles flying in a single exchange, a rate no movie battle even tries to show. The chaos wasn't just about who could swing a sword hardest, but who could survive the opening barrage. I've tried axe throwing at a medieval fair, and let's just say the only thing I hit was the ground. Now imagine that, but on a battlefield, with dozens of axes, spears, and rocks flying at once. It wasn't about perfect aim. It was about volume and luck. The more you threw, the better your chances of breaking the enemy's line, or at least making them duck. And if you were in the front row, you hoped your own side's projectiles didn't land on you. Shields weren't just held out in front. They had to come up and over, ready to block whatever was coming next. The real secret Hollywood ignores is that these projectiles could do what the men in the front rows struggled to achieve with their spears: break the line, knock someone out of position, or end the fight before it started. The tactical advantage was huge. If a well-thrown axe or spear found a gap, it could turn the tide before swords ever clashed. This was the moment when discipline mattered most. One hit, one stumble, and the wall could buckle. So next time you're watching a big movie battle, count how many things actually get thrown before the armies close in. The answer is usually 0. The filmmakers want you focused on sword fights and dramatic charges, but in real life, half the fear was from above. Shield wall combat started with a barrage, not a sprint. The first challenge was surviving the missiles, not the melee. And if you think the worst is over once the projectiles stop flying, you might want to reconsider. There's another movie myth waiting just around the corner, and it's got 4 legs and a lot of armor. If you've seen even one medieval movie, you know the scene. Rows of armored knights on big horses thunder straight at a line of foot soldiers, shields fly everywhere, and the horses plow through like tanks. It's dramatic, but it leaves out what really happened when cavalry met a wall of determined infantry. Did shield walls really fold up that easily? Or is this just another moment where Hollywood rewrites the rules of physics for a cool shot? In reality, massed infantry wasn't just a speed bump for mounted warriors. The truth is messy, and honestly, gives a lot more credit to the people holding those shields. Let's talk about what it meant to face a cavalry charge. For medieval foot soldiers, The sight of a line of war horses bearing down wasn't just scary, it was the kind of thing you dreaded for days. These weren't your average farm animals, either. Medieval chargers were powerful stallions, trained for the shock of battle. They were drilled to keep going even when arrows rained down or the noise was deafening. Still, even these war horses had their limits. Horses, no matter how well trained, don't want to run into a solid mass of sharp points and shields. A real shield wall wasn't a row of bowling pins. It was a packed brace line, with every shield overlapping and spear points or pikes sticking out like a thorn bush. The closer and tighter the formation, the less likely a horse would actually try to crash through. Picture it. Soldiers jammed shoulder to shoulder, shields locked, and the front rank bracing for impact. Behind them, more rows plant spear points outward, making a fence that gets longer with every man added. The idea was simple. If you held together, you could stop the charge. It wasn't about being the strongest. It was about not moving when every part of you wanted to run. The physics here matters. A charging horse creates a lot of force, but a solid wall of people and sharp objects is enough to make even the boldest steed hesitate or veer away. If the horse did hit, it could knock down the front line, but the formation behind would absorb the shock and keep fighting. The front row had a rough job, but their misery meant the rest of the unit had a chance. History has a perfect example. The Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. The Scottish infantry, led by Robert the Bruce, knew exactly what was coming. They formed tight schiltrons, circular hedges of pikes and spears, planted deep in muddy ground. English knights, sure of their advantage, charged again and again, but the Scottish lines didn't break. The horses slammed into a wall of spear points and packed bodies, and the charge stalled. The result? Cavalry, for all its power, couldn't force a way through. Bannockburn shows why those Hollywood scenes of horses bursting through shield walls are pure fiction. The real winner wasn't the guy with the biggest sword or the fastest horse. It was the group of ordinary people who stuck together and refused to panic. The real threat in these moments wasn't always the horses themselves. It was the fear inside the formation. If someone in the front row lost their nerve and stepped back, panic could ripple through the whole line. Shield walls didn't collapse because of brute force. They broke when the people in them thought, even for a second, that they were about to be crushed. The strength of the shield wall was always about discipline and trust. If the line held, the cavalry charge could be stopped, even if it meant bruises and worse for the front ranks. If the line broke, chaos followed, and the horses finally got their dramatic moment. Let's not forget about pikes. As cavalry became a bigger threat, infantry started using longer and longer spears, sometimes anchoring them in the ground. This meant more sharp points facing the horses, making the wall even harder to break. The pike formations of later centuries took the shield wall idea and turned it into something even more intimidating for cavalry. Horses could push, but they didn't want to impale themselves. The people in the front row still had the worst job, but the odds of stopping a charge went way up. Now, imagine being in that front row. You're staring down a war horse, hooves pounding, and you know your only hope is to hold your ground. You brace your legs, grip your shield, and trust that the person next to you won't run. It's not about heroics. It's about not being the one who panics. When you see a movie where horses slice through a shield wall like it's nothing, remember Bannockburn and the countless other battles where discipline held the line. The real drama wasn't in charge. It was in the moment when ordinary people decided to stand firm. So the next time you watch a cavalry charge send extras flying, ask yourself what's really being shown. The history is there, but it's rarely as flashy as Hollywood wants you to believe. And that brings up a bigger question. Why do these myths keep coming back, no matter how many times historians point out the real story? Hollywood's version of history does more than just entertain. It quietly rewrites the images we carry around in our heads. When you think of medieval battles, what comes to mind? Probably cavalry charges that shatter lines, lone heroes swinging swords in slow motion, and shield walls that fall apart the second the music swells. That's no accident. Movies are built for spectacle, not for accuracy. And the result is that the most dramatic moments take center stage, while the slow, tense reality fades into the background. The way filmmakers frame these battles shapes what we remember, even if the truth is a lot less flashy. Take a moment to picture a classic movie battle. The cavalry is always the star, storming across the field, scattering infantry like dominoes. But in reality, it was usually the infantry and the logistics behind them that decided how things ended. Horses might look impressive, but packed shield walls and careful coordination often stopped them cold. Real battles were more about holding the line for hours, arrow volleys hammering down, than about anyone breaking out for a solo charge. When I first heard medieval combat was just chaos, I never watched another movie the same way after I learned infantry often held firm for hours, arrow volleys and all. That shift in perspective sticks with you. Movies sell us the myth because it's exciting. You get spinning cameras, wild charges, and extras flying through the air. In contrast, a real reenactment looks almost dull. Shields locked together, nobody moving unless they have to, and everyone's face set in grim determination. Side by side, the difference is obvious. The movie version is a whirlwind, but the real thing is all about order. Shields lined up like puzzle pieces, every gap a potential disaster. That's why the channel uses quick-cut graphics and side-by-side comparisons, so you can see for yourself how history and Hollywood rarely match up. The more you see these contrasts, the more you realize how much discipline and teamwork mattered, and how little room there was for showboating. These myths don't just stay on the screen. They creep into textbooks, classroom projects, and even the way we talk about history. You hear medieval battle, and your mind jumps to chaos. It's like a game of telephone gone wrong. Each retelling makes the story a little wilder, a little more cinematic, and a lot less accurate. Even people who love history get tripped up by these images. The first time I saw a real shield wall in a reenactment, with shields overlapping and no one breaking ranks, it felt like I'd been tricked by every movie I'd ever watched. Suddenly, the battles I thought I knew looked completely different. If you want to spot the difference, start with the details. Movies love solo heroes, messy charges, and horses that never slow down. Real shield walls advanced slowly, with shields overlapping so tightly they looked glued together. The back ranks weren't just along for the ride, they were hurling projectiles, trying to break the enemy before swords ever clashed. The channel's checklist makes it easy. On one side, you have the movie myths. On the other, the disciplined teamwork and patient advances that actually won battles. Once you see a real formation, the movie chaos starts to look a little silly. Some filmmakers get it right, at least for a scene or two. Every now and then, you'll catch a moment where the line holds, the shields stay locked, and nobody tries to steal the spotlight. But most of the time, drama wins out over accuracy. It's not just laziness. It's that a steady wall is harder to film than a chaotic melee. Audiences want action, and so the myths keep coming back, bigger and louder every time. The truth is, a disciplined shield wall just doesn't sell tickets like a wild cavalry charge does. Knowing the difference isn't just about feeling smart at trivia night. Once you understand how much teamwork and patience mattered, those dramatic movie charges lose some of their shine. The real magic of the shield wall was in the trust between neighbors, the willingness to stand firm when everything in you wanted to run, and the quiet discipline that kept everyone alive. It wasn't about looking cool, it was about surviving the most stressful group project in history. Now it's your turn. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What's the wildest shield wall scene you've seen in a movie, especially one that completely ignores missile weapons? Or which dramatic myth do you think deserves the crown for most overused mistake? And if you spot a film that actually gets it right, let everyone know. It's easy to see why the movie version sticks, but the reality is where the real lessons are. Sometimes the most impressive thing isn't the chaos, it's the patience, the teamwork, and the grit that kept people standing when everything was on the line. So what really held a medieval shield wall together? It wasn't about putting on a show for the crowd. The real power came from cohesion. The way each soldier's shield overlapped with the next, making every gap a risk and every step forward a test of trust. Survival depended on everyone doing their job, not on one person breaking out for glory. Have a favorite movie moment that gets it hilariously wrong? Or one that actually gets it right? Drop your picks in the comments. Subscribe for more real tactics behind the legends and solid history grounded in the real science and tactics of the battlefield. In medieval warfare, winning wasn't about looking good on camera. It was about making every shield count, one step at a time.